one, I'm going to tell you about render layers. Once the animation and textures have both been improved for your shot, once you have cached the animation and lit the scene, your next step is to create render layers. What render layers do is they isolate each asset so that you could render them all out separately. You're going to render the characters, each one separately. You're going to render the shadow separately, and any props separately. This ensures that you have more control in Nuke when it's all being composite. What you're essentially doing when you're creating these layers is you're creating an alpha channel for each individual layer. What an alpha channel does is it cuts out the character from the background and it leaves the background transparent. On your end, when you render it, you're going to see the background is black, but you'll know that that just means it's transparent. Your scene should be fully set up before you start your render layers. So you should have your Robert cache, and you should watch my caching tutorial if you do not know how to cache. You should have the props and any other characters cached out, and then you should have everything fully lit. The scene should also have your shot cam cached out as well and ready. Make sure that your scene is just fully assembled, fully complete, lighting is done right before you start your render layers. Let's go into render layers. Go to Windows, Rendering Editors, Render Setup. Now you have this window. Right over here, you're going to create your first render layer. This is going to be Robert's render layer, so call it Robert Beauty. So go ahead and right click that layer, create collection. What a collection is it collects all of the meshes that is for this layer into the collection. So that is where all the meshes are stored. This is also where some edits will happen to the render, which I'll go into a little bit later. So for the collection, call it Robert Collection. It's important that you name all these things. So never just forget to name it. Always name it. So now that you have the collection selected, as you can see when I select the layer, you're not going to see the collection, so make sure that your collection is selected. And then take a look on the right side here. This is how you'll add the meshes into the collection. Go ahead and find the Robert Geo, select the Geo, and then add. Now you've added Robert's Geo into the Robert collection, and that's where it belongs. Now that you've created Robert's layer, or Robert's Beauty, and his collection, now that you've put his mesh in there, we're going to do the same for the clipboard. So add a layer, say Clipboard Beauty, right click, create collection, Clipboard Collection, select the clipboard's geo, and add it. This right here is where you'll control the layer visibility and also what layer you're rendering at a time. So this top one right here, this is the master layer. So right now we're viewing the master layer. Everything is all together. But that's not what we're going to render. We're going to render Robert separately and the clipboard separately. So take a look over here. I'm making Robert visible only, and that's going to reflect in the render. Now, we're only rendering Robert. And I know that the background is not black yet. That's because the HDRI has the camera on. So you're basically seeing what the HDRI is, which is that, like I told you before, it's that world view of a photograph that's acting like a huge light source. And I'm going to take that away shortly and I'll show you how. Right now we're only viewing Robert. And when I click this right here, this means that we're actually only rendering Robert. If I click this one, we're going to render the master separately and Robert separately. So you can render multiple things in one go, but I do recommend you just render them all separately. The reason I want you to render them separately is you'll have more control. If you select like all three of these, the computer is going to render the master, and then right after that it's going to render Robert, and then right after that it's going to render the clipboard. However, you have less control. Like maybe you needed to make an edit to the render once you saw the Robert one, and you don't want to render the clipboard out right away. So I just recommend rendering one layer at a time. So right now, we're technically set to view Robert's beauty and to render this. And then now we're set to view Robert's beauty and render both of these. But like I said, don't do that. Just do one at a time. So just to show you, now we're only going to view the clipboard, as you can see it right here. I showed you this in the lighting tutorial, but I'll show you again. In order to get rid of the HDRI backdrop, what you're going to do is go to the sky dome, select that. Now go to the attribute editor, make sure you're in the sky dome shape. Now go down to visibility and look at camera, and then you just put 0, and now you have your black alpha channel background. One more thing before we move on. Take a look at your Arnold and your perspective shape. Here, this is the camera that the render is going to be viewing. If you only see perspective shape, don't get frustrated. Just go to Windows, Rendering Editors, Render Settings. Please dock this up here. You're going to need it frequently. Go down. Make sure that renderable camera is your shot cam. It's very easy to just have it on perspective and then just be like, it's not rendering, but it will render. Just gotta make sure everything's right. And if you have it on perspective and then you change it to the shot cam and it's not updating here, just reset Maya, give it a little refresh, and then it should be okay. If you have multiple cameras in the scene, just find the correct one. If you don't know which one the correct one is, ask the animator, please. What the next step is to render out your shadow. And let me show you how to do that. So the way that you do that is by creating a shadow catcher, also known as shadow matte. What that is it's just a surface with a special material called shadow matte that allows your shadow that's casted by your character to be rendered out separately from the character. First thing you're going to do is create a plane. In your perspective view, find your plane, make it bigger, make it just big enough to be underneath Robert. And I would make it larger. For some reason it's coming out textured, so just go right click, assign new material, go to the shader, go to AI standard surface. Now that you're casting a shadow on a surface, see how it looks, analyze it, change the lighting to where it looks really diffused, because we're going for a diffused grocery lighting. So make sure that it's nice and diffused. Make sure that it gets approved by us too. And then once it is approved, go ahead and move forward. Look in your renders, especially the ones that contact the floor. If you see any spaces like this, you've got to send this back to the animator and they have to fix that, because we cannot have surfaces that are not casting occlusion shadows on the floor. So now that you have this plane, go ahead and right click, change the material again. So go assign new material, and then go to shader. Find this shader called AI Shadow Matte. Select it. You can see that your plane disappears. That's because it's not really meant to be a surface. It's just meant to catch the shadow and make it renderable. So now that we've created that, I would call this ground plane. And then I'll drag it under your lights so you know where it is. And then go ahead and go into your render layers. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a new layer, call this Robert Shadow Beauty. Okay, now create a collection, call this Robert Shadow Collection, and put your ground plane into that. There you go. Now that you've created this shadow layer for Robert, as well as the shadow collection for the plane, you might think that you should be able to see the shadow, but that's not true. The way that you see it is by looking at the alpha. So if you go to this icon here, you're looking at the RGB right now. The shadow will only show up in the alpha layer. So go ahead and find alpha, and you'll find that it's still not there. That's because the this layer does not know where Robert is in space right now. It doesn't know what is being casted on this shadow mat. So right now everything is just invisible. So what you have to do is you have to take Robert's mesh, which is in the Robert collection, go edit, copy, and then select the Robert Shadow Beauty layer. And it's important that you get all these correct. Like, don't click this, click Robert Shadow Beauty, go edit, paste. Now you see Robert and his shadow. However, we don't want to render Robert and his shadow, we only want to render Robert's shadow. So we're going to have to create an override. An override lets us have the effects of something, of a mesh, of a light, of something, without that actual thing being in the render. So right now we want to render Robert's shadow without Robert. So we need to override Robert's mesh. How we're going to do that is we're going to select Robert collection, because that's where his mesh is, and then also go up to the top right, and we're going to select Robert's mesh only. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deselect all of these, and I'm only going to select surfaces. I'm going to select Robert's surface, just like that. I'm going to shift, right click the ground plane, because we don't want to get the ground plane in this. We are only trying to select Robert's mesh. So select his mesh, make some room here, find the shape. Because now that you have his mesh selected, there should be a shape. Looks like we're here in the shape, I believe. Let's see. Yep. Just look through these and find his shape. Go to Render Stats, find Primary Visibility. Now that you've found that, middle mouse select it and drag it to this area right here. Drag attributes from the attribute editor. Add override. So add it there. And just to reiterate, that's in Robert's collection. So you drag that in. Look what it created. It created another collection. And then now it created a primary visibility. What you can do is uncheck this. So now you told Maya, I don't want to see Robert collection, but I want to see the shadow that Robert is casting. So Maya said, okay. So it took Robert's collection, it saw that, okay, Robert's rig is in Robert's collection, and then it went down here to absolute override, and this is where you're just controlling whether or not you see Robert. And that is overrides. Like I said before, overrides let you have an item. It lets that item influence the environment, but it can take away that item because you don't want to render it with the shadow. You want to render it separately from the shadow. We got Robert's beauty. Inside of that, we have his collection that has his mesh in there. Then we have the clipboard beauty with the clipboard collection that has the clipboard's mesh. We've got the ramen beauty, same deal. And we have Robert's shadow beauty. It's a little bit different. We have the plane mesh in there, and that plane has a shadow matte texture so that it catches the shadow. We have a Robert collection that we copied and pasted from Robert Beauty, and then we made an override, and that override created another collection that is holding the override, and the override is where we're controlling whether Robert shows in the shadow pass or not, and we do not want him to show in the shadow layer. The next thing I'm going to tell you about is how to create holdouts. Holdouts are another type of override. When a character is holding a prop, you have to tell Maya exactly where that the character is holding the prop, so that it can hold out that area so that the prop doesn't come peeking through. And I'll just show you how to do that right now. As you can see here, Robert is holding a prop. So this prop needs to be accounted for in the render layers, because we need to tell Maya that this prop is in front of Robert's arm. We need to hold out the prop from Robert's render and make it just a black alpha. So I'll show you what to do step by step. Open your render layers. In the Robert Beauty layer, create a collection, right click and create a collection. Call that clipboard collection. And this needs to be done by any prop that's held by a character. So, oops, make sure that's spelled correctly. Now select the clipboard collection. Find your clipboard right here. So select the clipboard, and then actually you can select the clipboard geo and add it into this collection. So now go ahead and select all the individual geo themselves, and then go to the attribute editor and find the shape. This is very important. You can't find the shape unless you have the literal geo selected. So just select the mesh, and it's going to look exactly like this for the clipboard. Go to geo shape. As you can see, you should be looking for this right here. It should end in the word shape. So select that, go to down here to Arnold, and then find this matte right here. Make sure that once you're in Arnold, make sure that you're viewing the Robert Beauty layer. So go ahead and select the eye for the Robert Beauty layer, and now right click the matte and click Create Absolute Override for Visible Layer. Now, Maya created a collection, and in that collection it created an override. This is the holdout. Over here you see AI matte, so go ahead and turn that on. Now you have a holdout for the clipboard, and like I said, you're going to do this for each prop that Robert is holding. So now, as you can see, the clipboard is being held out for the render. If this is not updating for you, go ahead and go to Render, Update Full Scene, and it should render out with the alpha held out for you.